reaching the next generation.
Okay.
So I think it's important that we start off by understanding how they speak, right? And understanding the language.
How do you do, fellow kids?
So I'm just gonna quiz you real quick about some terms, and hopefully I understand them well enough to know. Bussin'. What does bussin' mean?
Oh, it's going really great. It's going really well.
Yes.
Your love is bus.
Sounds good, I guess, but I don't have any idea other than headed to school.
What is Riz?
Riz, like you're super Riz, man.
Oh, charisma, like attractive, like has it all together.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Date Mike. Nice to meet me. How do you like your eggs in the morning?
What's sus mean?
Suspect.
Yeah, see?
That's short for suspicious.
I have no idea.
Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
How about sus?
That's suspicious.
Yeah, see? Hey,
I just learned that one.
so how about drip?
Drip. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. The drip today is incredible. I cannot be messed with today. My goodness. Get in line, ladies.
How about cracked?
Oh, I don't know that one.
Bad.
My friend here, Justin, he's already taken, and he's cracked at Fortnite, my guy.
How about vibe? We're just vibing here.
You're just vibing? Vibing?
I don't understand the words you just said.
Okay.
So say less.
Say less? Mm-hmm. That's it?
Mm-hmm.
Say less. Oh, say less.
How can that be positive?
Cause it hangs them up to see someone like you. But you've gotta make your own kind of music. Sing your own special song. Make your own kind of music, even if nobody else.
Oh, that's a cracked bussin' video. No cap. My name is Ron, and I get to serve as your campus pastor. So excited to be here this morning. And for those joining us online, we're glad you're here. We're digging into this series, and it's been exciting. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I want to think back on a story that happened to me a bunch of years ago. My son was born with this desire for engines. He loves anything with an engine and a steering wheel. And he just loves cars. So from the baby on, and we were on a family trip. We were out in Detroit, and I was doing seminary classes there, and we were there for a time, and I had set up an appointment to see a vehicle. We needed to replace our Suburban. So we were checking out a truck, and I went out and I'm checking out this vehicle, and I wanted my wife's opinion. So I asked her to come with me and to check, will it work for you? Will it work for the child safety seats? We had a 2-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter. And she said, I don't want to leave them in the car alone. And I said, it's okay. What could happen? It'll be fine. They'll be in the car in their safety seats, and we can go look at the vehicle. So we got out. She listened to me. She's learning not to do that. And as soon as we got out, my son popped that safety seat, climbed over the front row of seats, got in the front seat, put the key into the ignition, turned it forward, pulled it out of park, and we turned around on this beautiful sunny day to watch my son standing on the front seat, hands on the steering wheel, grinning ear to ear while he rode backwards for his first drive across 4 lanes of traffic. And I was just booking it to try and catch that little guy. He was over the moon excited to drive. Loved to drive. But just because he wanted to drive did not mean he was ready for the open road. Not yet. And the harsh father that I am thought he should wait until he had a license. But But before that license, what do? I started to teach him. We'd go to empty parking lots, we'd practice. Anytime I'm in the car with him and we're there together, front seats, talk about directions, road signs, how do you navigate different circumstances and different scenarios. Let's start learning ahead. And then that 16th birthday happens, and eventually a permit. And then I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and my son's in the driver's seat for the first time. And some of you know what that feels like. It was a little scary for me. You've launched your kids too in multi-ton steel projectiles sitting on top of gallons of flammable liquid with other projectiles coming at 60 miles an hour together on a highway. My son learned to be, I believe, a good driver. But what does it take for a New York State driver's license? 50 hours of practice. 15 have got to be at night. 5-hour class of instruction that you need to pass, or driver's ed for a semester. And then you need a road test to prove that you are a competent driver. And after all of that, there's still road signs, stoplights, traffic signals, stop signs, guardrails, rumble strips, all to keep you and the other people on the road safe. But what if when my son was young, I just tossed him the keys and said, you've got this. Hey, you want to drive. You enjoy that, and you know how to even turn the car on. Just go figure it out yourself. He's ready for that. Well, he's got his license now. That would be a disaster, wouldn't it? That would be a disaster. And yet, that's exactly what sometimes we do with something just as dangerous. See, we've got devices in our pockets that open a whole new wide world of unlimited information and many dangers without road signs, without warning signals, with no rumble strips and no guardrails. And our kids and our teens, they grow up with devices and screens around them all the time. It's all around us. And so we almost naturally, we give technology. Because after all, we have good reasons. We want them to be able to call us if there's a problem. We want them to call 911 if there's danger. We want them to be safe. We also probably don't want them to be different than everybody else at school around them and a contrast to their friends. We want to help them. We think it'll help in their education. We want to give them good things. We're their parents. We love them. And so we want to give them good, but often we give technology with very little guidance. And phones can have incredible potential and pitfalls all at the same time. See, phones and tablets are very common. They're understandable. But just because they're understandable and common and our kids know how to use them almost intuitively does not mean that they will use them wisely. Screens are so pervasive in our society, they're all around us. And I just want to take a second here. Anybody here that has a phone, why don't you raise that up? Who's got a phone with them today? I do. How many of us have a phone? And if you don't have one with you, how many have access to one at some point in their life or a screen of some type? Screens are pervasive. Technology is pervasive all around us all the time. Nearly all of us have ongoing access to digital media at some level. In talking with some of you over the last couple weeks, what I found is many of us just naturally know that not all is well when it comes to our screen use. We know this. We feel this. We can sense the tension. Think about it. How about on breaks at work? Do you see people around the break table deeply connecting with deep relational conversations? Or many of them maybe spread around the room with their hands and their heads and their phone. How many of us have ever gone out to eat and watched other people on dates sitting next to each other with their eyes so deeply connected, longing for each other, holding on every word, or separately on their phones across the table. How many of us have been in the same room as someone else and got a text from them instead of them coming over to talk? Or maybe we've done it. I don't know. Screens are pervasive, and what we sense is not all is always well. People are walking, they're driving, they're working, they're sitting in school, all on their phones or other types of devices. We feel the draw, we feel the temptation all at the same time. But here's the rub. Our devices are incredible tools, aren't they? They're incredibly important all at the same time. There's nearly infinite content right at our fingertips. And so our phones help us. They help us search for answers when we need information. They help us keep up with the news. They help us navigate roads. How many use them as a GPS? I did that this past weekend. I had to make a trip to Rochester. They help us even do math. I remember in high school, my teacher said, "You'll never have a calculator in your pocket." I do. We use them to save memories, to share memories, to connect with people and friends and family. We use them for entertainment, to decompress, or to read a good book. We also have phones, they allow us to stay organized, to stay on diet, to stay on exercise, even deodorize. There's got to be an app for that, right? According to Pew Research, 95% of adults and teens have access to digital media, to smartphones. 95% of us. And here's the interesting thing. 48% of adults self-describe their use of their phone as, "I cannot live without it." Cannot live without it. And almost all of the teenagers self-describe their use of phones and digital media as almost constantly. Now, they don't mean every second of every day, but continually ongoing throughout every day, throughout the time that they're awake, almost constantly. See, we live in a digital world. It is our reality. It is our young people's reality. It's the world we live in. That's where we're at right now. But what if this is truly bigger than one generation? What if this struggle, this digital struggle, has a more root problem? A bigger root struggle that goes way beyond the generations? And what if we can actually help the next generation with digital screens, to use them wisely, to grow and to use the benefits and not get lost in the pitfalls? I want to take a look at some principles today from God's Word and just consider, while we may not find screens and internet and media in the Bible, the principles of God's Word highlight root struggles that are the same things we fight with today. We just fight with them in a little different way. So take a look with me at some of these principles. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Jesus' friend John wrote about the world, and this is what he said about the world. He says, "For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our accomplishments and our possessions. And these are not from the Father, but are from this world." And then he says, "And this world is fading along with everything people crave." It sounds a lot like today. The world offers that craving for physical pleasure, craving for pleasure from our eyes, what we put in. And yet those pleasures they won't last. They will gradually fade. Think about screens. They're morally neutral. Our screens are morally neutral. But our cravings and our media is not. Today, fast-paced scrolling videos are kind of the way things get given to us via media today. It's captivating hundreds of millions every minute, getting them stuck in a loop of scrolling. TikTok is named for this. It's a whole platform, and it's named for that exact idea. And the idea is repeated or replaced media every few ticks of the clock. That's why it exists. That's what it does. It's one of the most successful platforms today, and the rest of them are following suit. And the question might be why? Simply put, it's addicting. It's addicting. You get hooked. You get hooked with cravings for what you see and cravings of physical pleasure. And Katie Greer is a former director of internet safety with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. And she recently came to our area to Endicott School and was explaining how all this works. And what she did was a test. She tested TikTok. So she got on TikTok with no background, no brand new account. And she said, I'm going to find out how it learns about me. And she decided, I won't comment, I won't like, I won't post, I won't interact. The only thing I'm going to do is scroll. Okay? And from her scrolling, in less than 24 hours, it had figured out what her political views were and what candidate she planned to vote for. Less than 24 hours, without any interaction other than scrolling. So what do you linger on? What takes a couple extra seconds before you scroll on to the next? And it figured her out. And that's what it's meant to do. It has what's called a learning algorithm. And TikTok throws 15% of its content at you just to figure out what you like. And it'll use that to then funnel you the things that keep you on what you want to continue to watch, to get you hooked in. 5% of their content they just throw at you as adult content, just to see if maybe you'll go down that trail, and then they'll hook. It's discovering cravings for what you see. It's bigger than just a trend, though. It's based on brain chemistry. Who's heard of dopamine? A chemical within our brain. And when you see something you like, something that excites you, your brain releases dopamine. And you enjoy that chemical. And it only lasts a little bit of time. And then something else that you like will introduce that dopamine again. And what that does is trigger your cravings for physical pleasure. And it keeps it going. It produces a chemical addiction over time. The more you receive of dopamine, the more you need. The more you want. To get that physical pleasure, you got to have more. And eventually, it keeps cycling and cycling. You want to repeat that stimulus. And so each one of the major platforms, platforms like X, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, they're all using this scrolling and reeling type interface now. They're not as effective as TikTok, but that's where they want to go. And the idea is to get us hooked, to get us stuck. Instead of movies or concerts, we end up getting fed a sequence of endless clips that lock us into a loop. Everything's designed to lock into that addictive loop. And like any chemical addiction, you need to have more and more and more to feel the same level of pressure. The problem is, over time, that pleasure, what does it do? It fades. John had that figured out. Our cravings will eventually fade. The pleasure will fade. And the more you keep scrolling, no longer then to get the pleasure, just to not receive dopamine deprivation. I just got to keep the level I'm at. And you want more, and you want more, and you want more. The trouble is, the result isn't happiness, it's depression. And people online actually self-describe this as doom scrolling. That's their terminology. And apparently that's what people do for fun. That sounds like fun to me. But studies show in the Western world, so this is across our society, America and other Western countries, that there's a great happiness decline over the last couple decades. And it has led to psychiatric problems, and across the medical field, this is very understood. I was amazed just researching and diving into this topic how much the secular world understands these problems. And so there's all kinds of problems that are showing up now and being diagnosed, and all from digital dementia, Facebook depression, FOMO. We can have that without screens. I think I was born into that problem. Internet addiction disorder, video game addiction. And for many, digital detox is a huge struggle. It's a huge struggle. It's frightening. Withdrawal is real, and it feels impossible to unplug. We think of the 48% of adults that described, I can't live without it. Can't live without it. See, our world thinks freedom is indulgence without limits. But that's not working out so good. It's not working. What if there's another option? I'm going to take a look at Romans chapter 12. If you would turn or tap with me to Romans chapter 12, we're going to look at the first few verses there. If you don't have a Bible, we have Bibles in your rows. We'd love you to have one of those. You may take it as our gift. I'll be on page 913 in the chair Bible. Romans chapter 12. You see, Paul was an ultra-committed Jew, and he wrote the book of Romans because when he met Jesus, everything changed. And he went from an ultra-committed, legalistic Jew to a committed, devoted Jesus follower, wrapped up in God's grace. Paul was all in. And check out his advice in Romans 12. And Paul says, "Dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God." And the idea is all of ourselves, to give ourselves to God. Paul says, because of all that he's done for you. He came for you. He died for you. He sacrificed himself for you. He loves you. He wants good things for you. Give him yourself. And Paul goes on and he says, let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind that he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you. It says, let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Not that you would be stuck into a copy of the way the world thinks, but opening your mind to truth. Paul says, then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. But God's got great things for us. He wants the best for us. Our media, our screens, they're pervasive. The screen themselves is morally neutral, but the media is not. And it's set up to change us. It's set up to rewire our brains. And if we don't choose a different path, media will choose it for us. It'll funnel you the direction it wants you to go. It'll influence your values, your beliefs, and eventually your attitudes and actions. So don't just become a copy. Let God transform you. That's what we want. God's transformation. God wants us to be all in for him, and he gives the option of freedom. Freedom of thought by opening up our minds to what is the truth. What is his plan? What is his purpose? How did he design us? What did he create us for? And Jesus said in Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters. And Jesus was teaching, encouraging, place God as your Lord. Place God as your master. You can't serve two masters. So don't get sucked in by a second master. And in his day and age, that was money. And you know what? It still is. That can be a huge master. But our screens, I think they fit this principle. The principle itself goes beyond just money to what are we going to allow to master our life. And our screens have the potential to master us and our time, our thoughts, and our attitudes. And Paul in verse 3 of chapter 12 there that we're looking at, he adds this warning. Paul says, don't think you are better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves. Measuring yourselves, like not by the measurement of the world, but by the measure of your faith God has given us. Don't be conformed. Don't become a copy. Don't follow the direction of this world, but instead be transformed by God. And be careful. Be careful. Paul wants us to be free, but he also knows that we tend to deceive ourselves. We tend to not be honest in how we evaluate ourselves. We tend to say, I can handle it. I can deal with this. It's not a big deal. How many of you remember being a teenager? Some of you. Apparently not all of us. Did you ever fall into a trap when you were young? Something that you look back on and say, man, I didn't see the reality of that situation. Maybe it was with your friends, maybe the places you went, maybe the activities you enjoyed. And when you look back on it and you say, man, I wish I made a different decision than that. Maybe what you bought or what you ingested. And you look back and say, man, I was trapped. I made an immature decision. But you know what? As adults, we still fall into traps, don't we? We still get trapped. But it's easy for us to say, I'm in control. And yet all of us have blind spots, don't we? We all have blind spots. And his warning is, be careful, be honest. If you want to grow, if you want to step forward, you've got to be honest. To make wise decisions and set up healthful boundaries, we have to be honest in our evaluation of ourselves, because none of us have an immune or an addiction immunity gene. We don't. All of us can be addicted, maybe to different things in different ways and different levels, but all of us have that potential. And our battle today is often in our hands and in our minds. Yale Medical Research has compiled a huge amount of study on this topic, the effects of screen use and social media in our younger generations. And they found that young people who excessively use their screens, and for them, their definition of this was 3 hours and more, up to 2 to 3 hours and then even more. And most high schoolers self-define their use as 5 hours to 11 hours a day. So many people fall into that level. They said people who use excessively have 2 times the level of depression, anxiety, social and emotional development delays, physical and relational aggression, defiance, body image insecurity, eating disorders, sleep deprivation. Young people struggle, and when they struggle with these things, where do they go to get answers? They go to their screens. And what do the screens do? They continue to funnel them information that just feeds the struggle. And it's not hard to just see so many articles about what you're struggling with. You almost think, I'm just stuck in that and everybody else is too. Do you remember being in middle school or high school? And when you were in that part of your life, were you ever concerned with what others thought of you? You see, middle schoolers, in their development, they yearn for, they are driven by, they are motivated by the desire of acceptance. And imagine giving a place or a platform where every bully and every rival has a platform to share their thoughts. Imagine a place where you see the filtered best pieces of everyone else while you see the imperfectness of yourself. And then add on to that a quantifiable way to determine your self-esteem with a system of likes and follows and friends, where you can look at everybody else and see how popular they are and how popular you are, and constantly evaluating yourself based on that. The pressure's on. It's easy how you could get lost and hopeless. Maybe it seems ominous, and maybe you're thinking, yes, but our screens are an incredible, important tool. And you'd be right. You'd be right. So what principle can help guide us? See, Paul wrote this. He said, you say I'm allowed to do anything. But not everything is good for you. And even though I am allowed to do anything, Paul says, I must not become a slave to anything. And the simple explanation of this, I just want to put it in very simply one sentence. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because it's available doesn't mean it's beneficial. There's a dirty little secret in Silicon Valley that the tech industry knows this. Maybe they can't quote that verse, but they know this principle. And so New York Times did a study with tech executives, Facebook, Mozilla, Apple, eBay, Google, Yahoo, and we could go on. But they looked at tech execs and found that they shared one rule in common. When they headed off to the office each morning, they told their nannies this: no screens. It's very interesting. What do they know that we don't know? Many of their employees use private schools that don't use any screens. They keep them out until high school. Men like Bill Gates said he did not give his children a smartphone until they were in high school. He wanted them to first learn responsibility and restraint and the value of face-to-face conversation. And so he waited. They're waiting until their children are the maturity level of driving a car to have screens. What do they know that we don't know? What aren't they sharing? Tristan Harris of Google compared our smartphones to walking around with a slot machine, drug dealer, and porn dispenser 24/7. He put screens on a spectrum from sugar to cocaine on their addictive nature, and said they're far closer to cocaine in the way they trap our minds. See, it takes wisdom and maturity to recognize these dangers. And I don't know about you, when I was in middle school, I didn't have a ton of wisdom. I made some mistakes. I had some things to learn. And if I must not become a slave to anything, then I need to be very careful with the technology in my pocket. Because regardless of our feelings, right, screens are here to stay. And I'm not advocating let's just throw them all away, and that's not the point. How do we navigate them wisely? How do we help the next generation? Even if our children don't have their own, someone around them will. They'll have access to it in some way. So how do we help our young people navigate the digital jungle that we live in? How do we help them make wise decisions? So what do we do? What do we do? Regardless of whether you have kids at home or not, if you want to impact the next generation, then I want to encourage you to be an example of digital wisdom. Be an example. It starts with us. It starts with us. Our kids will do what they see. They're going to look at us, monkey see, monkey do. And so they see the monkey, they're going to do it. And our teens, they're going to push the envelope even further. So building relationships and living an example is so essential. Consider a couple examples. God described Job in the Bible. He described him as a man who was blameless and upright. who feared God and turned away from evil. And Job said this, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look with lust at a young woman. I made this promise with myself. David is another example, and God described him. He became king of Israel. He's described as a man after God's own heart. And he struggled. He struggled with his eyes. Later in life, he made this commitment. I will refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. He had to pull back and promise. See, what we look at, what we focus on is very important because it will influence us. And remember, God sees everything you see. And these godly men made promises about what they would allow in because the content in our mind will change us. Our devices, the internet, our media, it brings into our hand an incredible amount of content. But not all that content is beneficial. And it can trap us. It can addict us. The potential is there. So decide ahead of time what you're going to let in. Decide ahead of time what is beneficial, what is important. Paul gives us some other advice in Philippians 4, 8, and 9. And he says this, Dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about these things that are excellent and worthy of praise. These aren't always what social media feeds us. Not everything on social media is true. There can be a whole lot of spin. Not everything is honorable. There can be a lot of hate. And when we're posting, let this be what we post. When we're looking, let this be what we focus on. So what type of content are you putting in? Be an example of someone who focuses on what is good, what is right, what is admirable. You know, it only takes a few looks, a few swipes, a few lingers to start down a dangerous path. So are you modeling healthy screen limits yourself? Maybe tech-free zones in your home. Maybe tech-free times. Do you have accountability in place? Are your screens hindering your family time? In our busy digital world, your spouse needs more of you, not less. Your kids need more of you, not less. Turn off what is questionable or what is useless and put in what is good. So how do we equip the next generation with digital guardrails? Number one, big picture, take time to build relationships. Rules won't solve the problem. Relationships can. Build relationships. What does it take? Well, sometimes putting the phone down and picking up a board game. Take some time. Show that you value the next generation. Have face-to-face conversations. Invest in them. Share with them. Take time with them. Ask questions. Learn about their hopes and their dreams, their desires, their worries, their values, their insecurities. Find out about them. Maybe play together, exercise together, go outside and enjoy creation together. And then as you are, tell them about Jesus. Share with them your faith. Connect their hopes and their dreams to Jesus. A relationship by itself might not be enough. They need intentional help with their screens, but you won't be able to give them guardrails without the relationship. You might be thinking in your own life, well, the genie's out of the bottle. And I'd like to encourage you, it's never too late to start putting in some control. Limits and guidelines are tough, But if you want to help the next generation, they're important. So if we want to help guide, take time to train and to guide. We wouldn't toss our kids our car keys when they're in middle school or as a baby, would we? We wouldn't just say, go figure it out. You got this. We shouldn't do that with the digital world. Take time to guide. And my family, myself, I'm learning about this. I'm growing. We're just entering this digital world with our teenagers. We've waited until high school, but we're just entering this world too. There's no perfect answers. Every child is different maturity, different levels of what they might be able to handle. And so if you have children at home, just let me share some practical tips. Here's some practical things to think about. Delay giving a personal device as long as you can. So the later is better. The world around us recognizes that. The later we can, the better. We've had our children wait a little bit. And I would encourage you to watch screens together. We have tons of media in this world. Don't just send them off to their room and off by themselves to watch it on their own. Take time to watch together. Watch a movie together. Talk about it. What's good and wholesome in that movie? What maybe was questionable? How do we react in life? How should we handle this? Mentor them. Talk through it. Train your kids with good influence. If your kids already have devices without limits, discuss your concerns. Have a meeting. Talk about it. Make a plan together. Talk about what might be appropriate and what you can agree on together. Make a plan. And use parental controls. You can lock phones at night. You can require approval to install apps. You can limit daily screen time and maintain passwords as a parent. You can spot check your kids' phones. Don't give unlimited access. Delay social media. It's actually illegal until after age 13. So if a young person gets social media, they have to lie to do it before age 13. But use privacy settings, require approval for friend requests, mentor your children, use the social media with them, mentor them with it, walk with them through this world. Maybe have a tech-free zone in your house or a tech-free time in your house, maybe before bed. Through high school, gradually give independence. You want them to be launched well. As you do this, keep the communication open. Be a safe place. Let them know that they can share with an adult if they see something inappropriate, that they should share. They shouldn't keep it to themselves. Walk with them and help them learn wise decision-making practices. If you'd like to dig into this topic a little more, there is a ton of great resources, and you can visit the website bbctransform.org/parents. There's a bunch of resources on there. If you had to get only one book, Parenting Generation Screen, I think, is the best. It has a lot of practical tips on the scope of this issue, as well as how to parent and how to do that well in a very balanced and understanding way. We have things on this website like where does your child fit into their age and their development, as well as how to make an agreement, how to handle parental controls on a phone. There's so much here that could help you. We have KidsMin volunteers that are helping right now in our KidsMin program. They're there to help you. They want to connect with parents. They want to help you make steps of growth. We have lunch on Sunday evenings where our teens come, and there's mentors there and adults that want to pour into the teens and share with them their faith, but they're there for you as a parent as well. We'd love your teen to be a part of that. We'd love you to connect with our launch leaders. There's incredible resources. But what if we lived as examples of digital wisdom? What if we built relationships into our lives? Relationships with the next generation where we shared boundaries, but we didn't do so without relationships. Where we didn't put love before limits. Where we didn't put correction before connection. What if we were the examples and it started with us? I believe we can help the next generation navigate the world we're in, put guardrails and guidance in their lives. See, screens are the battleground of our age. They're the place that we have to step up. And it starts with us. Alyssa's going to play a song in just a few moments. And as she prepares for that, let me read some of the lyrics. It says, "Be careful, little eyes, what you see. It's the second glance that ties your hands. As darkness pulls those strings, be careful, little feet, where you go, for it's the little feet behind you that are sure to follow. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. It's a slow fade when black and white turn to gray. And thoughts invade and choices are made. A price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. It's a slow fade." As Alyssa sings, just take a moment to listen and reflect and consider, what step will you take to be an example of godliness and wisdom in a digital age? What step will you take to help this next generation so we don't slow fade?
Be careful, little eyes, what you see. It's the second glance that ties your hands as darkness pulls the strings. Be careful, little feet, where you go, for it's the little feet behind you that are sure to follow. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. It's a slow fade when black and white have turned to gray and thoughts invade. Choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. It's a slow fade. It's a slow fade. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. When flattery leads to compromise, the end is always near. Be careful, little lips, what you say. For empty words and promises lead broken hearts astray. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. It's a slow fade when black and white have turned to gray and thoughts invade. Choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. yourself away, it's a slow fade. When black and white have turned to gray and thoughts invade, and choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. Families never crumble in a day. It's a slow fade. It's a slow fade.
Would you pray with me? Dear God, we can't win this battle alone. The only way is to draw closer to you, God. Thank you for loving us and giving us your forgiveness, your grace. You've washed our past away and you've given us a future with you. God, help us to embrace that love and then to share that love. May you help us in this area to be on guard, but to do it in your power and to place you first in our lives. God, help us to draw near, draw close, to rest in your arms and to walk with you. In Jesus' name, amen.